Hi, today we are going to talk about adoption stuff. I'm specifically going to talk about one thing that happens with families very often in adoption. And I think it happens more often than I even remotely realized when we started our adoption process. And it's called disruption. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through um, an adoption process and then get to disruption. And hopefully, if you are considering the adoption process, you never go through this. If you, I'm going to just tell you from my perspective, we are currently in the adoption process. We've done all the paperwork, we're home study approved. We're just waiting and waiting and waiting for that call. So that's where we are in our journey. And so I'm a bit of a novice, but I feel like it's helpful to know. So that's why I'm sharing here. So when we first got started, we went to like an intro, like informational meeting just to learn like what does even adoption look like. We knew that we wanted to adopt a baby, but we were open to a child up to around 3 years old, mainly just because we already have a little boy we're raising named Graham. And so we weighed everything. So we go in, we get the informational meeting, and then from there it just kind of kept rolling and rolling with paperwork. And I met with the social worker, and my husband Corey met with the social worker, and we met with her together. And she even met our 4-year-old, and he was 3 at the time. So like all of that stuff happens, and that is part of your home study process. The social worker will also come to your home multiple times to, and I can talk about home studies another time in depth, but they basically continue to ask questions about your family, see that you have a normal home that a baby can live in or a child can live in, and you go through all of that. When you're finally done with the stacks of paperwork, you become what they call home study approved. And at that stage, you can be matched with a waiting child if you're going maybe for an older child, or you can be matched with a mom who is pregnant. And so then you just kind of wait and wait and wait. And depending on what agency you work for, that process looks different too, because you have to say, well, we're okay with what age group, what racial background, your finances come into play. So there's a lot of things to consider before you're matched. And then also, the birth mom can say, I want a family that lives close to me, or I want a family with that they're okay with a single parent family, or they want the child to have a mom and a dad. Like the birth mom also weighs in on that matching process. So then somehow it all works out. The birth moms are presented with information, a profile of different adoptive families that fit her criteria, and she fits theirs. And then she just selects the family. So I'll start, that's kind of the general process. So we started this, it's actually going on, I think we've been in the process for 17 months. We started the paperwork before that, but we've been active with our agency 17 months. And I will say, I don't say that number to discourage anyone who is considering adoption, because some people get matched in a week, some people get matched in 2 months or 3 months or 9 months. Like there's so many factors that come into play. Well, our situation was we went live with our agency, active with our agency, and our profile was on their website, and the printed material was available for birth moms, and they were sending them out to different birth moms. And we had several situations that came up. One in particular came up where they call us, and it was, I think, a Wednesday, and they said, there's a baby born in Florida. Can you be there tomorrow? And so they were like, pack, don't buy your plane tickets, but pack. And then in the morning, early morning, we will call you and tell you where to fly, all the details, all that. So I started to pack, but then part of me is like, I'm going to be really sad if I have to unpack these bags. So I'm a really good packer. I've traveled a lot, moved a lot. So I was like, you know what? I can throw a bag together, no problem. I'm going to wait until I get the for sure go ahead. And so I stopped packing and went to bed. And then it was 8 o'clock in the morning and I hadn't heard anything. And I thought, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't seem good, because I was thinking I'd be on a flight by 8 o'clock in the morning, not having like radio silence. And so it was around 8 or so in the morning, our social worker called us, and our adoptive family specialist, and said that the mother had changed her mind and that she was going to try to place the baby with her sister. It didn't look like that was going to happen. And so it was really a sad day, because more than likely that child ended up in the foster care system, which that can go well or it could go poorly. And it just felt sad, because that little baby girl, it was a girl, could have ended up and been our forever child, and she wouldn't have any of the bouncing around in courts and all of that. So it was really hard for that to happen. We didn't travel or anything for it, because we got the heads up not to do that, but that happened. And then we had several other situations where we knew we were being presented to the birth mom. We said yes, because her situation was slightly outside of our criteria. And so we said it was either maybe a little bit more money than we had thought we would be able to spend, or just slightly outside of our initial criteria, or just our comfort zone, really. And all of those fell apart. There was one situation where it was twins, boy-girl twins, and we were like so excited about that possibility. And that birth mom chose another family. And that's great. Like, you want the birth mom to pick a family that she's like super comfortable with. So anyway, we've been at this for a long time, and we've had a few of those situations that have come up. But then this past summer, there was a birth mom who saw our profile and chose us, and like we were excited about it. There were some things, again, that were a little bit outside our comfort zone, that we had to like really think through and pray through and like say, okay, are we okay with these challenges or potential challenges going forward? We had a phone conversation with this birth mom, and she seemed really sweet, but it was abrupt, and there were, it was a little bit bumpy. But then we were matched, and we did all the paperwork for that. There's a whole nother set of paperwork you have to do when you're officially matched with a expectant mom. And so we did all of that paperwork, and you have to send in your match money at that stage. And so we did that. We had to wire the money. That had to be there within like 2 days. So anyway, did all of that, and then we were just waiting for her to go into labor. And we had about not even a month before her due date. So we started making plans in light of that, and my husband started setting up. We had a crib, so we started setting that stuff up, and like, just sort of walking towards the fact that we might be getting a baby relatively soon. And then we didn't know boy or a girl. So I pack clothes for a boy, clothes for a girl, all the things that we thought we might, bottles and formula and all the stuff. And the plan was that I would fly to North Carolina, stay there a few days because my family's in North Carolina. And we would leave our 4-year-old Graham with them. And then Corey and I would fly to where the birth mom or the expectant mom was living and would be delivering. And so I would fly from North Carolina, and he would fly from here. We would meet there, go in, meet the baby, all that. So we do that. Graham and I, our 4-year-old, fly to North Carolina with our bags packed with the baby. I leave very clear things out that Corey's to bring with him, like the car seat and a blanket and a stroller. All that stuff was ready to go for him to bring on his journey to go get the baby. So Graham and I are in North Carolina awaiting the due date. I knew I was going ahead of time. There were a few family things going on, like my niece was born, which was great. I got to be there for that. But we were also there anticipating the due date of our matched expectant mom. But then it just became apparent that she was talking less and less and less to the social worker. And I started to get really anxious about it. And the other piece of it, particularly with our agency, once you're matched with a birth mom, you are not shown, or expectant mom, a potential birth mom, you are not shown to any other expectant moms. And that makes sense because your family is connected to this birth mom and this baby. And so no other, you're not live with them in that sense that they're mailing your profile to other birth moms because you can't be selected by two. So it makes sense. But I also felt anxious of like, okay, well, basically for this time frame, no one else is selecting us. And if she doesn't place, then we're just kind of back to square one. And so basically this expectant mom who seemed very sweet just fell off the radar completely. The due date comes and goes, and I start to get like kind of worried about it, and talking with my social worker and just saying, our adoption specialist, um, what do we do? And they basically kind of went back. They had very few medical records, but what they could figure out is that basically her due date was kind of like a question mark. It could be what we thought, or it could be like a few weeks late. So but I'm sitting in North Carolina, like waiting, like I'm not at my home. I'm like staying at my parents, and we're just kind of in this limbo. Suitcase packed, like our suitcases are packed and ready to go with all the baby stuff, and just waiting. When do I book the flight to go fly out to get the baby and all of that? But then days turn into weeks and weeks and weeks. And so basically it was nice to spend time with my family, but I was like, we've got to go home. Like, we can't just sit here and wait, not knowing if the birth mom was going to ever come back around or not. And so basically we had a hard conversation with our social worker and just said, we just need to dissolve the match, because she's not even let anyone know where she is or what's going on. And they even contacted the local hospitals that were in the area to say, if she comes in, she has selected an adoptive family. And so nothing like that ever happened. And so we still don't know what happened. So while we didn't travel to the hospital to get the baby, we did all of the packing up and traveling to do all the preparation to go and get our baby. So it's so hard, it's so hard to go through a disruption. That is what a disruption is. If you hear that word and you're like, what does that mean? It means you are matched, specifically selected and matched, and you're paired with a mom, and you have a due date in mind for when this baby's coming to join your family. You start getting a hospital plan and your travel plan and all that together. And then the mom has, even if the baby is born and you're there, depending on what state you're in, you have like 48 to 72 hours to, even some states I think could be longer, that the mom can decide to parent. And so that's a lot of times what happens in a disruption. Ours was a little bit weird in that she just kind of fell off the radar and stopped contacting anyone. And so we pretty much immediately asked to be active again and go back out for other expectant moms to see our profile so that we could move forward. And because we were ready for a baby at that stage. I mean, we didn't have everything prepared in the house, but we had a crib up and all the supplies basically that you would need to bring an infant home. And, we were preparing our son to have a baby here. And so our whole families knew. We had done some fundraising, and so we let that whole crowd know that the baby was coming. And so it's really sad. It was a really sad thing to walk through, that, you're prepared to drop everything and jump on a plane, bags packed, ready to go. And it even we had just traveled to North Carolina to then go get the baby whenever she went into labor. So we prayed that baby's okay, and that birth mom made the right decision for her, even though we don't have any kind of, and our agency doesn't know either, like what happened. So that is our story of disruption. And like I said, I really, really hope that if you're considering adoption, or maybe you're in the same place where we are, where you're waiting for placement, that you never go through it. But I will say that I've read that like 1 in 4 families that go into adoption experience disruption. I even know of several families who go through it more than once, which sounds horrific. And I do think it would be worse if you were like already connected to that baby and holding that baby and loving that baby, for the mom to decide to parent or something come in the way of the adoption. That would be so much harder than even our story of the disruption. So, but I just wanted to clarify what that meant, and that it is a possibility. It's not a reason to not walk towards adoption or jump into the process, because everyone says, look, when it's the right child, it will happen. But it is something to consider. It is part of the journey, or it can be part of your journey. And here we are now. We're still waiting for placement. And it's just, when we talk about our adoption story, this is one piece of it. So that's it. That's what disruption is. Feel free to ask me any questions about adoption in general, disruptions, or even how do you become home study approved, all that stuff. I'm happy to hear, or answering those questions. I'm not an expert. I'm just sharing my story, our family story with you and what we've walked through, and hopefully it's helpful to you. That's my goal, is that I want to share my heart and our story, and I hope it's helpful to you in your journey and story. Thanks.